Good morning. It's Tuesday, September 6th, and I haven't bought a new car in about 5 years. And I remember that buying experience quite well. I went into Toyota and I wanted to get the Prius, and I sat down with the dealer, the salesman, and we negotiated a deal. I had a set of criteria for this deal because I was leasing the car originally, and my lease price was $250 a month. That's the price I wanted to pay for. And he came in and gave me that price. And when I looked over the paperwork, I noticed one thing. That was the buyback at the end of the lease was a couple $1,000s higher than I expected it to be. But I said, I'm going to turn this car in at that point in time. So I wasn't really worried about the buyback price at that point in time. But in the end, since I didn't really do a whole lot of driving in the time that I had the lease, it turned out that I ended up buying the car back for a couple $1,000s more than I originally thought I was going to be paying for this car. But it didn't really bother me because the car was great. It gave me no trouble. I've had no trouble with it. I plug it in. That's great with the gasoline and everything. I'm very happy with the car. But what's happened in the automobile industry, and I guess this is what's been happening for many, many years, that dealerships are no longer called dealerships. They are called stealerships. They're stealing your money, supposedly. And this leads to the point about being a savvy shopper. So when you go in to buy a car nowadays, there's a manufacturer's retail's suggested price. But the dealership doesn't have to honor that suggested price because dealerships are not owned by the manufacturers. The dealerships have the right to sell Toyotas and Hondas and Fords and Mercurys and Cadillacs, but they have no relationship to the companies that manufacture those cars. They are just set up as a sales organ. And so the manufacturer's suggested retail price is exactly that. It's suggested. And what's been happening, especially in the current environment, is the suggested retail price has gone by the wayside. You can rest assured that you can buy the same car as somebody else and you may pay more or less depending upon how good the salesman was and how good a haggler you are, because you don't have to take the salesman's first offer. You have to be prepared to bargain also. And they will start out at a couple of $1,000s above the suggested retail price. And you'll have to haggle with them. You have to be prepared to haggle with them. Because the strategy that these dealers are using, that the salesmen are using, is called price discrimination. Because what they are looking for, some hint on how much money you are willing to pay. That's what they're looking for, a hint. And then based upon the way they read you, that's the kind of pricing that you are going to get. And I am willing to bet you that if 25 people go in and buy the same exact car, none of them will pay the same price. Because the suggested retail price doesn't really exist. It's a question of how much the salesman can figure out to make sure that he gets a nice commission for himself and that the dealership makes a lot of money that they probably shouldn't be making. Because if you get the suggested retail price, you can be assured that there will be many tack-ons. Okay? One of the major tack-ons is something like the delivery fee. You have to pay for the delivery of your car to the location, to the dealership. And then there are many overpriced add-ons, like floor mats, for instance, or alarm systems, or the infamous rust-proof undercoating. And nobody can really tell if that's been done or whether the car came in with it already. And I would assume that most cars have that anyhow. So the dealerships are very slick in sizing up the customer. They charge older people more than they charge younger people. And then, of course, they charge black people more than they charge white people. That seems to be a national thing, that discrimination that runs through everything in our lives. But that's not the only form of discrimination that is happening. They're going to charge older women more than they charge anybody else. I guess they figure that older women just haven't learned anything during their entire careers. I suspect that that should be changing now because women are pretty savvy these days. But according to the stats, that seems to be what's happening. And then, of course, you have people who must buy a certain car. They come in with their heart set on some car, and those people have a sign that the salesman sees the sign, and it basically says, charge me more, charge me more. It's like a flashing indicator. And when you trade in your used car, they know the value of that car, and what they give you as a trade-in is probably 10, 15, 20, 25% less than if you sold that car. So beware. If you happen to have a new car in sight, in your mind, be prepared to haggle. Be prepared to go in there and understand what you're dealing with. This is not a simple thing to do, to buy a car, walk into a dealership, see something they're nice and shiny, and you must have, and you need it. Car nowadays is not a luxury item anymore, especially living in a place like Long Island. So when you go in there, make sure that the client, that the salesperson and the dealership knows that you're going to be a tough cookie. And maybe you have to practice a little bit. Maybe you have to do some research. Check out what the price of this car is really being sold for all around the country. Understand all of the different things that they can try to snag you on. And don't forget that the car that you go in to trade in is usually an indication of the car that you probably want to walk out with. If you're going in there selling a jalopy, they wouldn't expect you to be buying a Mercedes or BMW. The type of car that people drive is an indication of their status in life, at least at a certain age, I believe. So if you happen to be in the market for a car, remember, they're not dealerships, they are stealerships. And I'll leave you with that this morning. It's another indication of the world that we live in. Have a great day. Bye.